Whether you love them or hate them, it's absolutely impossible to deny the impact that the Beatles have had on popular music. Even to this day, they continue to inspire and influence countless new musicians. Since they came onto the scene in the early 1960s, they took the music world by storm. And they've pretty much influenced every single musician ever since, whether that's directly or indirectly. It's pretty much impossible to get away from the influence that the Beatles set out when they came onto the scene. Now, when we think of the Beatles, we have a huge array of genres that they dived into during their time as a band. They started out doing that very typical early 60s British guitar pop, and then as we got to the tail end of the 1960s, we started to see the Beatles moving more into more psychedelic sounding music, and also experimenting in some more rock-based styles. Now, the Beatles were definitely one of the first real rock bands. Rock music, as we currently know it, didn't really exist in the 60s until bands like the Beatles, the Stones, and all those guys from the 1960s basically invented the sound of classic rock. In this lesson today, we're going to be looking at 5 times the Beatles really rocked. This lesson is brought to you in partnership with musicradar.com. If you want to find out more about all the riffs I talk about in this video, you can scroll down to the description and there's going to be a link over to the Music Radar website. You can hit that link and it'll take you through to an associated article to go with this lesson. If you want the tabs for this lesson for any of the riffs I play, there's also a link down below in the description where you can get those from my Patreon page. So gear-wise, I'm using a really simple setup for this video. I'm using my Stanford Guitars Crossroad Thin Line. This is an ES330 style guitar, so it's completely hollow and it has 2 P90 pickups. This is plugged into the Birdsong Kestrel amp, which is a hand-wired Fender Princeton Tweed style amp, and that is pretty much turned up full. It's about 90% of the way up, so we've got a lot of breakup coming from the amp, and that is going via the 2-notch Torpedo Captor X, which is running an IR of a 10-inch Tweed style speaker in a big hall. So we're going to check out 5 riffs from times the Beatles really rocked. So as I said, the Beatles have done a huge array of stuff. They've gone from strummy pop music to psychedelic jam music, but through their career there's been a few times where they've really let rip with some great rock riffs, and in this video we're going to dive into 5 of those moments. The first one we're going to check out is the riff from Come Together. This riff has been covered countless times by so many different artists. Some of the most notable covers of this include Aerosmith and the more recent version by Gary Clark Jr. The riff sounds like this. So this is a really fun and really simple riff. There's not many parts to this. So we're playing a power chord on the 10th fret of the low E string. We're also playing the 12th on the A string at the same time, playing that twice. Then we're playing the 10 on the A string and doing a hammer onto the 12. And then we're playing a double stop with our first finger on the 10 of the D and G at the same time, but putting some vibrato on that. And those are just all the elements of that riff, so we just put those together. And that is all there is to that riff. That's a nice easy one to get us kick-started. So now we're going to check out a really cool riff. This is a really heavy riff by the Beatles standards, and this is the chorus riff for the track Helter Skelter. Now this is a kind of 12-bar blues style progression with a descending single note line that goes through it. This is a great kind of example of an early heavy rock riff, and you can really see how this riff turned into the heavier classic rock of the 70s and onwards from there. This song has also been covered a bunch of times, like with all Beatles songs. Everyone has covered the Beatles at some point. Aerosmith actually released a cover of this in the 1970s, but probably the most well-known cover of this is the cover that was done in the 80s by Motley Crue. Here's the riff in question. So this riff is a great fun riff to play, but it does have some technical aspects to it. So we're starting off with this 12-bar style riff. We're playing an A power chord, so it's the open A string and the 2nd fret on the D. I'm playing that twice, but keep it nice and choppy. and then we're going to the 4th fret on the D string with the open A. Then we're doing the descending rut, so it's open G, 4, 2 open on the D, 4, 2 open on the A. Then the riff does the same thing, but everything just moves up a string. So we're now doing the 12-bar shuffle on the E, and now the descending riff starts with the open D. So it's the same riff, but we've just shifted everything to a lower string. Then we go back to the A. So that's the bulk of the riff right there. So let me just play through that slowly. Then we're going to that dissonant sounding bend at the end. So we're playing the 5th fret on the B string and the open E, which are the same note. And then we're playing that 11 times. It starts on the and of the 1. So it's and a 2E and a 3E and a 4. And as we go, we're slightly bending it up each time. The first 4 we're not bending at all. And then for the remaining notes, we're bending slowly. It doesn't really matter too much if your bend doesn't go up a full step at the end. We want that slight clash. That's kind of what gives it that edge. That comes in after the last repeat, so if we play that riff in full, it's going to sound like this. The third riff we're going to check out is from the song Paperback Writer. This is definitely one of the Beatles' faster riffs. It's a really fun bluesy riff that's kind of based around a G power chord. The original version of this song has a really driving bass line as well. When they were in the studio, the story is that John Lennon was unhappy that a Wilson Pickett record had a more prominent driving bass sound than the Beatles record, so he demanded that the bass was basically cranked to the point of breakup, which is how the sound from this track came about. Here's how this riff sounds. So to play this riff, we're going to be barring across the 3rd fret of the E, A, and D strings. We're not going to be playing all 3 of those at the same time, but we're going to keep our finger in that position because it's going to help us with this riff. So we're going to pick the E and then the A string. Then we're going to play the 5th fret on the A and the 5th fret on the D. You'll notice I did 2 picks, a down and an up. Then I added the extra 2 fingers on. 3rd on the E and A, 5th on the A and D. Then once you've got that part under your fingers, we can go on to the second part, which we're going to be playing the 3rd on the E and the 3rd on the D. The 3rd on the E and the 3rd on the A. Then we're going to be playing the 3rd on the E once more, hammering on from the 3rd to the 5 on the A. And then playing the 3rd on the D to finish. So here's that half together. So we're basing everything off that 1 chord position, which does make this slightly easier to play. So here's how this sounds played slow. And then once more at full speed. It's definitely one of the Beatles' more tricky riffs because it's quite quick and there's a lot of alternate picking going on there to get the note definition. When you're working on that one, break it right down and play through it slowly. All right, riff number 4 now, and we're ramping the difficulty up. This is a track called Yer Blues. This is a 12-bar blues style riff, but over the top, which is the line we're going to be focusing on, there is a kind of fuzzy blues rock type riff going on over the top, and that's what we're going to be learning. This is a really fun one, but it is quite tricky. It sounds like this. So this riff has a little bit of interplay with the two guitar players. On the backing track, there's another guitar that's playing this little dyad here on the 3rd fret of the B and the 4th on the G. So I'm not playing that because that part interlinks with the part that I am playing. You can try and link those two up together if you want, but you don't have to because there are two guitar players at work there. So what I'm playing is the 2nd fret on the D string. Then we're playing the 5th on the D, and we're doing a bend up and releasing. And going back to that 2 on the D. So in that gap in the middle, that's where you're going to hear that dyad. So you could play it that way if you wanted to play both parts at the same time. That riff then continues to cycle, but it slightly varies each time. So on the 2nd time it goes. So the big difference there was that I bent twice. So I'm bending a full tone, releasing, full tone, releasing, just off one pick. The first bend is longer than the second one, so we go up and slightly hold, and then the second one we kind of flick it back. The 3rd time is exactly the same thing, but instead of coming back to the 2, we go to the 7 on the D. And then the 4th time is the same as the 2nd time. So if we put those 4 repeats together, I'll play the dyad on this one just so you get an idea. It's going to sound like this. If it's too difficult to play that dyad, you can just leave that out altogether. Then it goes to this ascending line. This starts on the 3rd of the low E. Then we play the 5 slide up to the 7. To the 5 on the A. Then we play that 5 again on the A and hammer onto the 7. And 5 on the D. Then we're going into this cool sliding riff which goes like this. So this is quite a tricky little riff. If you've never played anything like this before, you may find this tricky. So I'm playing this with hybrid picking, because I'm using my pick on the G and my middle finger on the high E. You can just play this entirely with a pick if you want. So I'm starting off by playing the 6 on the G, and I'm sliding it up to the 8. And then I'm using my middle finger to pick. The 7 on the high E, slide that back to the 5. But that's not what we're hearing on the record, we're hearing this. So what we're hearing there is the combination of both notes ringing. So you want to slide, and as that 8 is ringing, you're picking that 7. So we get a harmony there, and then we're sliding both fingers back 2 frets at the same time. So we get the sound of that back together. It's quite a nice little riff there. It takes a bit of coordination to get that right. Then I'm playing the 4 on the G and the 4 on the E. Then the 3 on the G and E, but I'm sliding this down to the 2. So that is a little bit of a tricky riff. If you've never played anything like that, take it slow. Go as slow as you can. To make sure you really nail the coordination of that. It's a great fun little lick when you get it. And then to end the riff, we have this fun little turnaround riff. So this is an E power chord, followed by the 3rd and 4th frets on the low E string, and then back to that E power chord. The 3rd and 4th on the A, and the 2nd on the D. Open D, the 2nd on the A, and then a B power chord on the 2nd of the A string, 3 times. And then it just repeats the whole riff. So here's that little part again. So that is a tricky riff. There's a lot of stuff going on there. I'm going to play that through now. I'm going to play the dyad in this playthrough just so you can hear it in context, because otherwise there's going to be a big gap there. But if you're playing along with the track, you don't have to play that dyad chord if you don't want to. And then at that point, the riff then turns around back to the start. The fifth and final riff we're going to check out is the outro riff from the track I Want You, She's So Heavy. So for this riff, I'm tuned to drop D, so my low E string is now a D. So as far as the Beatles go, this is quite a heavy track. A journalist at Classic Rock magazine said that this riff inadvertently created doom metal. So between this riff and the stuff that Sabbath did for us in the late 60s and early 70s, we can kind of see where that deep, sludgy style of music came from. This riff also has another Motley Crue connection. Even though Motley Crue never actually covered I Want You, She's So Heavy, if you check out the track Slice of Your Pie from the Dr. Feelgood album, the outro of that song is a huge tip of the hat to this riff. It's not exactly the same riff, but you can tell that they were very influenced by this riff when writing that outro section. It sounds a lot like it. It's got the same kind of feel, the same kind of groove, and that same kind of sludgy, droning sound throughout the outro of the song. It's a great riff, and you can definitely tell it's a huge tip of the hat to the Beatles. So this is a really fun riff. It's very heavy for the Beatles. It's in 6/8 time, and it goes like this. So while this riff is quite a rockin' riff by the Beatles standards, it's not that hard to play. It just sounds great. It sounds really big, and there's a great kind of sludgy stomp to this. The riff itself is very simple. It's an open low D string for 3 beats, because we're in 6/8 here, so it's 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3. Then the second fret of the D, the third, and the fifth. Then we're playing the open A and the second on the D. So we're landing on that second of the D on the next 1 beat. The open A string comes on the 3rd beat of the second grouping. So it's 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3 on that one. And that second fret is back to our 1 beat again. Then at the end of that bar, we have this chromatic run down. 3, 2, 1 on the A string. 3, 5 open on the A string. And then 3, 2 on the low D. And then the riff's back to the start. So even though it's a very heavy, sludgy riff, like I said, it's really not that hard to play. So here's how it sounds played in full. So there you go, there are 5 riffs from the Beatles that really rocked. The Beatles did a huge array of music, but rock was definitely not something we overly associate the Beatles with. They weren't known as an out-and-out rock band, but there were definitely occasions in their catalogue where they really showed us that they could keep up with the other guys in that genre. So there are 5 riffs that are a lot of fun to learn and really showcase how much the Beatles could rock when they wanted to. As I mentioned earlier on in the video, there's a link in the description to the Music Radar website where there's going to be an article that's associated to this lesson where you can read about everything I've talked about. And if you want the tabs for this, you can hit the link from my Patreon page, which is also down in the description. Let me know down in the description what your favourite Beatles rock moments are, and if there are any riffs that you think I've missed out of this list. And while you're down there in the comments letting me know which Beatles riffs should have been included in this list, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing to the channel as well. Let me know how you got on with learning some of these riffs. And like I said, let me know if there's any that I forgot to include on this list. or your favourite Beatles rock moments that should have been on this list. I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys think. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I'll see you guys very soon.